Alright guys, we're going to make another Viking knife, sort of like this, but it's going to be a little bit smaller. It's going to be of the neck knife variety. I'm going to start out with a block of spring steel. This is the dock, they dock off the end of the springs. We're measuring about 50mm long, about 20mm wide, and I think she's about 7mm thick. I'm going to start out by breaking the bar up from about there, and this whole back section here I'm going to draw it out so it's going to look basically like this, and I'm going to draw it out, I don't know, probably half to 3/4 of the way, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it around and I'm going to work on the front section of the blade. But what I'm doing is I'm going to throw this in the furnace, I'll let it get hot, and I'm basically going to hang on to it with my trusty tongs, grab the big hammer, and I'm going to break it over the edge of the anvil. So if you look on sort of the side here, I'm going to sort of sit it there, hit it at that line, I'm going to break that and keep hammering that down and break it away, and then start to draw out the reins on that side. And I've got a line on the anvil here, it's about 180mm long. That's the finished length of the tang that's going to be drawn out, and then the blade works out. Now I don't exactly have a way of doing this, but I know it doesn't look like there's a lot of steel there, but by the time it thins out it turns into a nice sized blade. So I'm going to take you along for the journey of the neck knife Viking. And these ones are actually harder to make than the larger ones, like in this style, simply because there's more steel and there's more time to work the steel. These cool down incredibly quick because the steel gets so thin. So I'll toss this in the furnace, literally. I'm running my furnace at about 1150-ish. It's still heating up, so it's not exactly the temperature just yet. And we'll get to it. So I got her out of the furnace, put it a little over halfway, and see how I've broken the steel. So that section there, you can see I'm starting to get a step in it. And you can see that it forms out quite quickly, although it's quite big. So what I generally do now is I'll generally stretch out this front section just a little bit, just so it holds into me tongs a little bit better and stops it from moving about, because it is, control with your tongs is very important. So we'll get it hot again. So I'm just going to fix up that bar and just square it up a bit more. Don't drop it. See, I didn't knock it up by much, but that'll give me a little bit more purchase on my tongs, so I can get it a little bit. She's out of the forge again, so we'll start to draw it out. So that's grown. That's grown in basically 2 heats to about 105mm. So we'll put it back in again and give it another go. Just while that's heating up, my hammer's a cheap Bunnings hammer. As you can see, she's a bit worse for wear, but I've been using it solidly for at least 3 years. At least, maybe more. Can't tell. I've never had a problem with it, apart from the plastic down here where my hand rubs, it's wearing it away, so I keep got to grind it away. Other than that, it's been a fantastic hammer. My other hammers that I use are basically two ball paints. One slightly smaller than the other. Nothing flash. Both hardware shops. This is an old one, this is a new one. Back up the temperature. Now what I generally do is, I'll draw this out a little bit more, but don't go too far with it because it becomes too thin and pliable. So what I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to work on the blade and get the blade roughly into shape and draw the blade out, and then I go back to finishing the tang. Because to draw out the blade, I've got to sit here and I've got to hit it basically there to break its corners. And if this tang's too thin, it bends up really easy. So I'm going to break that head of that, pull it over. And I just keep turning it 90 degrees just so it doesn't. You can see that it's a nice pointy shape. As you can see, it's a nice pointy shape, but it's still about, I don't know, 5mm thick. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw out that blade now. So we're just going to work on the blade. That's one heat. It's reasonably thin on the edge, still reasonably good on the spine. I've got to thin it out a little bit more back here, but nothing too much to worry about. I'm going to change to a slightly smaller hammer. So now what I'll do is, I'll let this cool off and I'm going to duck into the belt grinder and just quickly sharpen it up a little bit and give it a little bit more profile, because you're not going to do it on the tip as it is there now. So as you can see, I've just tidied it up on the belt grinder, just refined a couple of the lines. Not a lot really. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to put it back in the forge and we're going to finish drawing out the tang to its 180mm, so about another 50-60mm. We've been going 17 minutes at this point. So we're out again, fix up the little bend on the tang. About tang's at about 170mm, so a little bit more to go, about another 5-10mm, not much. So I'm going to give it another heat and draw out the tang, and then I'm going to turn it 45 degrees and I'm lightly going to tap it, and I'm basically going to break the corners of the steel so they're not as sharp, and it gives it a much nicer look. So this is the last heat on the tang. Now when you break the corners, you want to let it cool down a bit, about there I reckon. What I'm doing now, I'm forcing the tang to be in a nice straight line with the blade. So the next step is on the fork. So I'm going to put up the fork, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap it around the fork. So I'm going to bring the hammer up here and I'm going to pull it around to create the classic look. And we're going to bend this tang around. You guess it about a bit over halfway. Now it's important you get all this done pretty well much in one heat, because if you don't, you can't get it back in the furnace. I'm going to get it hot again and just fix up where it's sitting up here. Sorry you can't see. Fix up where it's sitting up here. Just knock that down a little bit more. And then a couple of normalising cycles and then heat treat it. Change to the real small hammer. What I did then was just pull it back a little bit. As you can see, there's the blade. This stuff here's a bit of kale wool, just a bit of spare kale wool. And we'll just sit the knife on there. As you can see, she's glowing quite happily. Move the camera a little bit more. Sorry about that. And we're going to let her get to a black heat, basically, so I can't see any more colour, and it's going dark out here at the moment. But in the meantime, I'm going to throw a red hot bar in here, create some flames, all that good stuff. Just don't burn your arms. So here's the red hot bar, and this is going to basically preheat my oil. There's smoke. This is just canola oil. So you want to get your oil above 40 degrees. I like to get mine a little bit hotter. That oil will be about 55 degrees, I reckon. Maybe a little warmer, not too hot. And you see my knife's at a nice black heat now. It's still warm, I wouldn't touch it, but you definitely wouldn't stick it in water. But I'm going to put it in again. And each time I throw it in the furnace, I'm turning the furnace down from its like 11 or 1200, trying to get it down to around the 900. The reason I do mine at about 900 is because by the time it comes out of the furnace and I stuff it in this oil, I would have lost a few degrees. Because you're really after hardening the edge. You don't need a hard spine on a knife. Alright, so I'm bringing you back. So I basically did a little bit of grinding, just a little bit of profile grinding. I mean, it took me all of about 5 minutes just to convex grind that edge, and then I put it in my bead blast chamber, and I basically bead blasted the surface, gets rid of all the scale, just gives it a nice clean up. And remember, we started out with a block that looked something similar to that. So, and I mean, going just on 40 minutes now, and I've been mucking around a little bit more because I'm on camera trying to get this done. So we're going to throw it in the furnace now, get it hot, and then we're going to harden it. Then I'm going to give it a quick clean up and another quick bead blast and a Scotch Brite so I can see the colours, and then we're going to gas torch it into the tempers and then sharpen. She's up to temperature now, so I put her in blade edge again. Sit her in there. There's no vapour barrier on the edge of the blade at all. I can see tiny little bubbles, but nothing. And then I generally start to slowly lower the blade in, because I want the back of the knife to be more of a spring. It's fully in the oil now, and I generally go backwards and forwards with it. Give it a few seconds in there. Move that oil to the side. It still is quite warm actually, surprisingly. Now I don't know whether you can see that, but you can see a hard line on the blade. Hopefully you can. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this a quick sandblast up, and then give it a quick Scotch Brite so we can see the colours. So she's been Scotch Brite look, and she's all sort of got a satin shiny finish. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to hang on to the back of the blade like this, and then I'm using a map gas torch. I'm going to map gas that torch to a blue, to a grey, because that's what you temper a spring to. Some people will probably tell me I'm wrong, but I worked in the industry for more than 10 years, so if they want to do that, that's their opinion. I generally hang on to it with a little pair of vice grips. It's not so important, the blade's not going to get hot. Now I'm looking for the colours. Start running. starting to get a faint straw showing up. Now what I generally do is I'll turn it around. Snap it on nice and tight. I don't know whether you can see the colours. But yeah. But they're the colours. So we're going to do the blade now. It's going to be very tricky when you do your blade. You want to heat up the bulk of the blade at the back of the spine up towards here. The colours will come incredibly quick because the blade is a lot thinner. I'm at a straw now, so I'm just going to gently quench that blade edge because I don't want to cut any remaining heat to keep running up the blade. Just cool it out in the water, it's not that hot. Now that's hardened and tempered, so I'm going to go give it a quick Scotch Brite again. I'm going to go give it a quick Scotch Brite again, and then I'm going to give it a sharpen. And then we'll give it a light buff, and then we'll do a sharpening test. So we're at the buffer now. This wheel's just a stitched wheel. I've got some green compound on it, nothing flash. Be real careful with buffers. And I'm just going to wipe that blade edge at a very, very shallow angle to the buffer, just backwards and forwards. And what I'm doing is I'm basically high speed stropping that edge. So she's finished there, and she's 147 millimeters long. In inches, that is 5.5 inches roughly. Now that's all sharpened, it's all ready to go. Roll up the proverbial sleeve, and we'll as you can see, she takes wads of hair off, lands on the paper. The famous paper cut test. You know, I have no worries about my knife sharpeners. It'll do it sort of all day. I'm turning my backyard into confetti. So that's what they are. Now that took about 50 minutes for me to make. I can do these in about 40 when I'm not trying to film. Hardened, tempered, finished. I generally sell these for about the $45, $50 mark. They're a great little neck knife. Now that's me hanging on to it normally. You know, choke up on the blade. They're a great little utilitarian style knife. I didn't mention the blade length. The blade length is 2 3/8 or 60, 61 millimeters sort of long. So don't know what the weight is. There's not much to them, but they're a great little knife. They're not bad for an afternoon of playing around. Now, I love these little knives. I think they're very useful. I love the blade shape on them. You know, they can be made in other shapes. You can definitely flatten the spine and stuff, so thank you.